Okay, so we are studying lines. We have been studying lines for quite a while here, and the general form for a line, the general equation is ax plus by equals c, some constant. And so we have the x, two variables, both in the first degree. So this is called the general equation of a line. Now we also have the slope-intercept form. And that was, recall, y. So if you solve for y, you get y equals mx plus b, b representing the y-intercept and m representing the slope. So this would be called the y-intercept. Sometimes people call it the slope-intercept form. Let's do that. That's probably the better. The slope-intercept, meaning the y-intercept form. Now we have a third equation of the line that I want to introduce to you, and that's called the point slope. Perhaps we don't know where the line crosses the y-axis, but we do have one of the points. So we would call this next one the point slope form. And that is going to be y minus y1 equals m, our slope, times x minus x1. And so if I have my slope, I'd plug it in here. If I have my x and my y, I'd plug it in there. Okay. So let's see how does all this work together. Let's look at some problems. If I am given a slope and a y-intercept, write the equation of the line would be very simple. I'd use the slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus the y-intercept. Or x, well, I'm sorry, that's not a negative. I don't know why I read it that way. Okay, plus 5. And that would be the equation of the line. If instead I'm given a slope and a point, that's minus 3 over 4, of negative 5, I'm sorry, I'm not reading these correctly, of 5 comma negative 1, what would I do? I could use the point slope, y minus, what is the y value here? A negative 1 equals m, negative 3/4, x minus, what's the x value? 5. Clean that up a little bit. Y plus 1 equals negative 3/4 x minus 5. And he seems just to be perfectly happy with this kind of form for my answer. Now, what if I had instead 2 points? What you would need to do here is find m and then use the point slope with either point to get your equation. Okay, now recall to find m, we're looking for the change in y. What's the change between 1 and 7? Over the change in x. Whoa, I was trying to write the simplified. Okay, so m equals 3. Now, how would I write it? I'll take either point. It doesn't matter. Y minus 7 equals m, which is 3, times x minus 3. Or there was one thing I failed to talk to you about. I'm sorry. Okay, when I'm doing the slope like this, I was trying to make it simple for you, I always have to go from one direction to the other to decide if it's negative or positive. So my y would be from 7 to 1, that would be 6, but my x would be from 3 to 5. 7 to 1 would be negative 6, right? I'm going down, and 3 to 5 would be positive 2. So let's be careful with these signs there. There we go. And I apologize. Make sure you understand, though, the signs on the slope. You're always going from one direction to the other. Okay. You cannot go for the y's this way and for the x's back up. Okay. Now let's go ahead and look at the next one. What if I'd use this point instead? I would say y minus 1 equals negative 3x minus 5. And either way, those would be the equation of the line. Now you might wonder why. Why could I get two different answers here and them both be the same? Well, they go through that in the book, and so I won't bother stepping it through. But if you solve the first one for y, you would get solve for y. You would get y equals negative 3 plus 16, and if you solve this one for y, you would get the same value. Okay, so that's why you can get two different forms here. Now, if you'll go to your book, get your book, put it on pause, make sure you're on page 302. And we've got three lines, in fact. The first one is kind of a line with a negative slope going down this way. And they're saying find the equation of each line. And because of the graph, you can read off the y-intercept. And it's negative 5. And because of the graph, you can read off 2 points. And the rise is, you're going down, so it's going to be negative. And the rise, the change in rise is 2 over 1, or negative 2. Okay, and so the equation would be we'll use the slope-intercept form, negative 2x minus 5. Now for the second line, when we think of defining our slope, it's the vertical change, right? The change in y over the change in x. Okay, and which one is changing? Or which one, I should say, is not changing? My x is changing, but not my y. Okay, so my slope is 0. The change in y is not changing. Okay, and the equation of this line would just be what y equals. In this case, y, because the x doesn't equal anything, you're never crossing the x-axis, so the y equals whatever it is, you read it off the graph, and there it is. And then finally, the third line is a vertical line. When we're thinking again of m, what is failing to change? It's the x that's failing to change, because x is in the denominator. The x is not changing, so that would be 0, and you cannot divide by 0, so my slope is undefined. Again, this is a review, but we're trying to make sure those are key concepts. But what is the only value I can assess? I cannot, not for the green line, line 3, I cannot assess any value for the y-axis because it never crosses the y-axis. So the x is whatever, wherever it crosses the x-axis, which is, in this case, is 4. So we've talked about how to look at a graph and identify, be able to write an equation for a line, write an equation for a horizontal line, a sloped line, I should say, for the first one, horizontal line, and vertical line. Okay, looking at the oral practice, If you're given the equation here, could you tell me what the slope is and the point is? That's just a question of understanding the point slope form of the equation. So my m would be 5, and my point, the x value, now remember it's always x minus x1, so in this case it's the 11, not negative 11, be careful there. This would be 11, and this would be 8. Okay, so be very careful, negative or positive there. Okay, now in the next one, you want to find the slope and the y-intercept. Okay. Now, actually, it says the directions are not that. The directions are name a point. So there's a point. Here, we would have to put it in the other form because we're recognizing this as a y-intercept form. Add. And so my point would be where it's crossing the y-axis here. So my y value would be 3/5, and my x value would be 0. So there's a point there. So really, they're just asking you to name a point. And finally, if we had something like y equals 3, my y value is 3, and my x value is 0. And there would be the point for something like that. Go ahead and do your exercises. I'm going to glance a minute more to see if there's anything else you might need help with. Okay, so for the first one here, it's asking you to find the slope. I wanted to guarantee we understood this one more time because of the signs, negative or positive. I'm going to go in that direction. For my y, then, my difference between 2 and 5 is 3. I'm positive 3 because I'm going from smaller to greater. For my x, it's negative because I'm going from 8 down to 1. And the difference between 8 and 1 is 7. So this would be a negative 3/7. One more review on that. If I'm asked to write an equation of a line that's vertical, okay, a vertical line is going to be like that. And recall that it's crossing only the x-axis. So you take just the x value. X equal 3 would be the equation of that line. If it's a horizontal line, and I'm asked to write the equation of the line, a horizontal line goes this direction, right? And it only crosses the y-axis. So I only look at the y. Y equals 1. And that should, I think, get you through this chapter. Okay. Have a great day.